Hey there, everybody. Conrad Iacobellis here for a brand new episode of The Scoreboard. It is Tuesday, and we have a jam-packed show for you today. Coming up, we're going to be looking at scores from this past Thursday through yesterday. And then in our second segment, Ryan Kostecka sits down with head baseball coach from Park City High School, David Feasler, to talk about the Region 8 preview. Basically, Park City, their first 13 games have all been on the road, and they have not had an outdoor practice. So Ryan kind of talks to Coach Feasler about hoping to get on home field and how the team is looking at having their first 13 games all be on the road. And then in the last segment, there was a big game on Saturday between the Wasatch Wasps and the Park City Miners of boys soccer down in Heber, and it was a very, very physical game, for lack of a better word. I think there was about 8 or 9 yellow cards given out to both coaches and players, so we'll deep dive into that game. But let's see what all the other teams did for Park City, Wasatch, and for South Summit. We're starting off with Park City right here. We can see a rough weekend for Park City. All of their teams lost in baseball, soccer, softball, and boys lacrosse. We're starting off with baseball. We can see the Miners took on Grantsville, the Cowboys, losing to the Cowboys at 9-7. Braxton Lyon and Kellen Dankers for Park City Baseball both had 2 RBIs. Kellen Dankers had 2 doubles, so he was the player of the game for Park City. Park City moves to 6-5 on the season. Again, having the first 13 games on the road, this is game number 11, coming out with a 6-5 record, being 1 game above 500. I would say that's a pretty strong suit for Park City. You'll hear with Ryan talk with Feasler that none of their games have been within region. So the fact that, the Miners have been playing teams they're not familiar with, it's been all non-conference games. The fact that they're 6-5 is coming out strong, and we're seeing their veteran leadership with Kellen Dankers. He's paving the way. He had 2 RBIs and 2 doubles against the Cowboys. If that veteran leadership can continue and hopefully spread to some of the younger players, I think the Miners will be in good shape for the season. They may not be in the top 3 within the region just because they're in a very strong region for baseball, but they're definitely going to be in a good sitting for playoffs. We can see with the soccer, we're going to deep dive into that, but the Wasps took home the victory with a score of 4-3. And then softball having a rough season. The Miners getting blanketed by the Golden Eagles 21-0. This was a perfect game by the Golden Eagles. The Miners had no hits and 3 errors. So rough for Park City softball, but as we've said throughout this entire time, this is a building for Park City softball. They are a very young team. They have not had an established core at all for softball, so they will probably progress throughout the season and hopefully build somewhat of a foundation for the next coming years. Take a look at Park City Miners lacrosse, a big loss in terms of, bouncing back for the Miners right there. They lost to the Cavemen of American Fork 12-14. This was after that big loss to Corner Canyon, that 20-10 loss at home. They were hoping to rebound against American Fork, unfortunately not able to. This was a non-conference game. The boys, however, were down 5-7 at half. They tied it 10-10 at third. In the third, and then unfortunately the fourth quarter really proved costly, where they gave up 4 and only scored 2. So the Miners, 2 losing games in a row. Hopefully they can bounce back afterwards. We're going to be moving on to South Summit. They only had 2 games this past weekend. Baseball, their last game was on the 20th versus Duchesne. And then we're going to move on to soccer right there. We can see the Wildcats. Both their games were against Providence Hall and beating Providence Hall both times. The soccer was able to beat Wildcats, were be able to beat the Patriots 3-2. We can see that soccer, they're having not a bad season. They're 5-3 on this season. They were down 2-0 at half, and then they scored 3 in the second half. And Providence Hall was not able to score, so South Summit was able to take home that victory. Casey Stratcher, Jason Rodriguez, and Alberto Cordona all scored for South Summit to get that victory again. Down 2-0 at halftime, so a big victory for South Summit right there. And then softball. South Summit softball so dominant this season. They are 12-0-1. Another big victory. Most of their victories have been by 10-plus points. They were able to beat Providence Hall 19-2. Presley Christensen was the winning pitcher. She also brought home 6 RBIs. She had 1 double and 1 home run. And then 8 out of the 9 hitters for South Summit softball all had RBIs. So this South Summit softball team is just absolutely dominant and very well-rounded. So South Summit went 2-0 this past weekend. Let's take a look at Wasatch. Only 2 games for the Wasps. Baseball for Wasatch, they haven't played since March 20th. Their next game is actually today versus Provo. So, we'll bring you those scores probably on Friday. We can see that, again, with soccer, we're going to deep dive into that, but they were able to pick up that big victory and move to the season 6-0. They beat Park City 4-3, and I can't wait to talk about that game because that game was very exciting and very, very chippy and physical, very much like a rivalry game should be. And then we can see with boys lacrosse getting a crushing defeat against Waterford, the Ravens beating the Wasps 12-11. For Wasatch, they moved to 3-1 on the lacrosse season. They were up 8-7 at half, and unfortunately, the fourth quarter proved costly for them. They were outscored 4-2 in the fourth quarter. So Wasatch going 1-1 this weekend. So overall, South Summit was the dominant high school, going 2-0. A big weekend for Park City where all their teams lost. So again, we're seeing how Park City lacrosse can rebound. They're supposed to be one of the top teams in Utah, especially in their region, and I believe that they are having 2 big losses. With Wasatch, it's really in terms, we didn't talk about their softball team because their softball team, their last game was against Spanish Fork where they lost 10-0. We talked about that last weekend. We're going to see how the softball team for Wasatch rebounds, and I'm going to get into soccer because soccer, Wasatch is absolutely dominant this season. They have proven to be one of the teams in Region 8, but one of the top teams in 5A total. And then with South Summit, it's all about that softball. It's all about, they're 12-0-1. They are cruising through victories. Even their tie was 10-10, so they're a powerhouse of an offensive team, just absolutely dominating. I mean, they're scoring anywhere from 10+ to 20 runs almost per game, just being absolutely dominant. They have a game actually today, tomorrow, on the road, so we'll see how South Summit does on the road. So hoping to move to 14-0-1 on the season. I mean, again, even if they pick up 2 losses, that's a 12-2-1 record. That's still an absolutely dominant record. So South Summit softball doing an absolutely fantastic job this year. So as a look at all the scores for Park City, Wasatch, and South Summit for this past weekend, I hope you all enjoyed that. We have to take a commercial break here on the scoreboard, but when we come back, Ryan Kostecka will be talking to Coach David Feasler from Park City Baseball.
Hi, this is Ryan Kostecka with Park City Television. I'm joined by David Feasler, Park City baseball coach. Coach, thanks for taking time to talk to me. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ryan. Always fun talking with you.
All right, so we're going to dive right into, Region 8 play and stuff. I know it starts for you this week. Before we get there, I kind of have a few questions to ask you. You're at a major disadvantage going into region play. You've had 13 games so far. You haven't even sniffed, your home field, let alone an outdoor practice. Talk about the disadvantages that puts you at, and how did you guys overcome that to have such a good start to the season?
Yeah, definitely. I'll get to the disadvantage for sure, but good for our kids not seeing it as a disadvantage, I guess. It's a crystal clear disadvantage. Haven't had any outdoor practices. Our first 13 games are on the road. We're on a school bus, charter bus, traveling an hour, sometimes 5 hours to games. Kids are missing fourth period 4 times a week. It's a hustle, man. But I think the cool thing about the group that I have is they're not seeing it as a disadvantage. They're seeing it as we get to go play baseball. So good for them. The easy solution, I think, from our end is turfing our field. Every school in the region has been on their field since mid-February, and I don't know, in the next 2 weeks, we might get on ours. So from a travel standpoint, disadvantage. From a not being able to practice standpoint, disadvantage for sure. But our kids are handling it well, like they do every year.
I mean, just said it, a turf field. You're the only team in Region 8 to yet to even play on our field. And in 2 weeks, it's not even 2 weeks we'll be able to host a game. No, 2 weeks we maybe could practice on our field. I mean, and you go down the valley where teams don't have to worry about it, and they all have turf fields. How much do you think turf is an advantage, especially for a school like Park City?
Yeah, I think it's a must at some point. And I know it's been talked about for 10 years, maybe more than that. It would help us out in terms of travel, in terms of being able to practice, in terms of safety. I mean, baseball indoors, it's just not super safe, right? So I think it's got to happen at some point. I make a big push for it every year. I know Jamie does as well, and our parents are all for it. I mean, when the travel schedule starts to impact academics, which it is, purely because of weather, not because of how we scheduled, but because we can't play on our field, right? It takes away 2 hours a week, 2 hours a night on homework time. And you and I both know kids aren't doing homework on the bus. So yeah, I think it's time for sure. It's been time for a couple of years, and I'm going to keep pushing and doing everything I can to make it happen.
I mean, people kind of maybe tend to forget that the word student becomes a word before the word athlete. You know what I mean? But so I was gonna kind of how ironic is it though that the only way you do practice is on a turf field indoors. I mean, it's the only thing you can do. You can't really see live pitch. You can't really get a feel for things. Is perseverance maybe the right word to use for your team thus far?
That's a great word. Yeah, we've played some really competitive games against very good teams. Our strength of schedule is up there with the best in the state. And the other teams know that we haven't been outside. They know we haven't played a home game, right? And we walk in there and beat some good teams and hang with some really, really good teams. So yeah, I'd say perseverance is a great word, and it's led by my good group of seniors for sure.
So, I mean, those seniors, I mean, they've been doing extremely well. You know, you and I have talked about it numerous times, but now you're heading into Region 8 play. Before the season, you were predicted to finish 6th. I think it's safe to say you've kind of past that limitation a little bit right now. How excited are you to be, you know, starting region play and getting into like the nitty gritty of your schedule here at the 5A level?
Yeah, I don't look at the rankings too much, right? Like it's really our first taste of 5A baseball. We played all 5A schools in the preseason, and we're right there with everybody. We played Salem and St. George and hung with them. Had a lot of opportunities to win the game. We open at Springville tomorrow for region play. I don't know anything about Springville, but I know a lot about our guys, and they're going to be competitive, and they're going to compete with the better teams. So, yeah, I mean, rankings aside, we're going to compete with every team in 5A.
You know, safe to say that one thing you probably do know about Springville is, hey, they're outside playing at least.
They're outside playing, and
yep.
I know it's far. I've never been there. But it's far away.
Well, talk about, you know, your first 2 weeks. You're at Springville, at Salem Hills. All 4 games are on the road. You know, and then you're ideally hoping to get on, you know, back home for that 3rd week of Region 8 play. More than likely, you'll probably still be on the road again. What's the message to the team? I mean, how do you keep these, you know, the kids focused? Just like, hey, I know it's a grind, but just keep doing what you're doing. How do you do that?
Well, first, there is a small chance we get on our field next week. So we somehow, like, we had a lot of melt yesterday. It's a question mark for next Tuesday. I'm hoping that it works out. I know our kids are, but I mean, in terms of keeping them focused, right? It's we had a motto 2 years ago that's kind of stuck with us, and it's choose your perspective, right? Is it like, oh man, we got to travel, we got to go on the road 4 times this week? Like, is it that perspective, or is it like, oh, we got to go play baseball, and that was taken from us last year, right? So I think our kids are really good at controlling their mindset and controlling the controllable of perspective. And I don't have to coach it that much anymore. I don't have to tell them like, hey, ground yourself a little bit. We got to go play ball. Like, they know, they're excited. Wherever we got to go, we'll go do it. So,
yeah. So despite the limitations, is there something that, you know, maybe something or someone that has really kind of impressed you so far throughout, you know, the start of the season?
Our senior class, man, has carried us so far. I have a really talented group of sophomores as well. But our senior class is performing on the field, and they're also just having some really impressive and impactful leadership conversations that are very organic, and it's not forced. It's like a dugout conversation that I overhear. Charlie Morris had a really impressive one the other day. We have a freshman that's getting some varsity time, Will McCurdy, good football player too. And he got picked off at second base, and Will comes back to the dugout, and I just overhear it. It wasn't meant to be heard by me, but Charlie just told him, hey, don't let that impact your aggressiveness on the bases, right? That's one mistake. Move on to the next one. The kid might steal 30 bases this year. So
that's awesome. I mean, that's exactly what you kind of wanted to see from that senior class. I'm stoked you're getting that for you. Well, Coach, you know, thanks for taking time talking to me. I really appreciate it. I know I'll be hoping you're back next Tuesday because I can't wait to watch you guys. For me, it's been 2 years in the waiting. You know, I was stoked to cover you last year. Didn't happen. I can't wait for this year. But, you know, wish you the best of luck, and we'll be following along.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Of course, this is Ryan Kostecka with Park City Television.
Welcome back to the Scoreboard, everybody. I'm Conrad Iacobellis. It's time to talk boys soccer. This past Saturday, the Park City Miners traveled down to Heber to take on the Wasatch Wasps, and it was an absolutely chippy game down in Wasatch. It was actually a pretty nice day. It's been cold filming sports. It was kind of a nice reprieve to be able to film during the day in a nice sunny Wasatch. A little bit of cloud coverage, but overall great conditions for a soccer game. Wasatch came out the victor with a score of 4-3. Wasatch was up 3-0 at the 20:55 mark in the first half. Park City came back to outscore them 3-1, but ultimately they lost the game 4-3. And this was a very, very chippy game. This was a rivalry game through and through. I believe there was, and we'll hear from Coach Gilmour in a little bit for Park City, but I believe there was something about 8 or 9, maybe 6 to 8 yellow cards throughout the game, both for players and for coaches. I believe only actually one coach for Park City got yellow carded. And I thought at one point the fans for Wasatch were going to get yellow carded. It was a chippy game. You could tell that these two teams do not like each other. They are competing for the same region. And at this point, the Wasatch Wasps were 5-0 and Park City was 4-0. So it was two undefeated teams, two teams that are proving, hey, we deserve to be in this region, trying to vie for that top spot. And of course, with the victor, Wasatch moves to 6-0, Park City 4-1. And it was a really different games in terms of style for these two teams. Where for Wasatch, a lot of their scoring was done in the penalty area or outside the penalty area. They're very much an outside team. You know, if this was basketball, Wasatch would have been a very dominant three-point team. Park City, a lot of their scoring was coming off of corner kicks and was coming off in the goalie area. Some of Park City's scoring was kind of catching Wasatch off guard, kind of getting that second chance. There was one score for Park City where the goalie for Wasatch was going to pick up the ball, and all of a sudden Park City came out of nowhere and just slide kicked the ball into the goal, kind of catching the goalie off guard. And another one was a corner kick where Park City, the ball went past the Wasatch goalie, and they were able to head it into the goal. So overall, a big win for Wasatch. And again, a tale of two different teams where Wasatch, you know, was getting, as you could say, the points outside the paint. Park City was getting them in the paint. Just if this was in terms of basketball. So, you know, I think that this was a big game for Park City, and we'll hear that from Coach Gilmour later on, where Park City's never been down this season, and this was their first time where they had to fight. They had to claw back against a very dominant Wasatch team, a Wasatch soccer team. This is the goal where Park City kind of got that second chance and kind of kicked it out. So that's how Park City was scoring, kind of just, you know, catching Wasatch off the mark. But as I said, Park City was down 3-0 at one point. They could have just, you know, been like, well, we're down, we're not going to win, because 3-0 in a soccer game is huge. That's a big run difference. And Park City said, you know what, no, we're going to continue to fight, and they did. They continued to claw. Again, this was a chippy game. Both teams were showing that they were both very physical, that they weren't going to back down. And it was kind of fun having the crowd get into it as well. For Wasatch, they face Maple Mountain today, and we'll actually have highlights for that. Maple Mountain is another very dominant team in region or in the 5A class, so we'll see how they pull out. For Park City, they moved to 4-1, and they will face Salem Hills. Wasatch, they had Taylor Dummer score 2 goals, Ryan Hanley score 1 goal, and Edgar Garcia score 1 goal. For Park City, Dylan Wisner scored 1 goal, Luke Bakowiski scored 1 goal, and then Luis Alvarez scored 1 goal. So we're kind of seeing, you know, those familiar faces with Wasatch and Park City soccer continue to score goals, continue to bring that veteran leadership. And overall, it was, again, it was a fun game for soccer. If you're maybe not a big fan of soccer, this would have been a game to get you into it for how chippy it was, for how back-to-back it was. Wasatch actually scored, you know, I believe their first 2 goals within the first 5 or 6 minutes of the half. It was very fast. It was a fast 2-0 game for Wasatch, kind of showing, hey, we're the home team. We're going to continue to be dominant, and we're not going to lay down to Park City. Park City just clawed and fought back and ultimately lost, but they showed, you know, some good perseverance, and actually we're going to hear about that from Coach Gilmour for Park City right now.
Yeah, it was what I expected for a rivalry game. It was very intense, you know, a lot of yellow cards, you know, tensions were high. And yeah, it was a close game at the end. Well, I think the fact that we were 3-0 down and, you know, 3-1 at halftime, come back into the game, you know, it was a close game, 4-3 score. I think just the fact that we showed, I mean, it's the first time in this season that we've been behind. Yeah, it just shows that we can play toe-to-toe with, you know, the highly ranked teams in the region and in 5A. I think the boys should take some positives that we went all the way. And we could have, you know, when we went 3-0 down, we could have conceded more. But I think it shows that we've got strength within the squad to, you know, to fight and to believe that we can get results.
And again, as Coach Gilmour said right there, you know, this was a big game to show that, hey, we can compete with these top dogs in 5A. Because remember, last year was the first time Park City moved to 5A. They weren't in 5A in 2019. So last year was the first time they were going to be in 5A. You know, obviously that season was canceled due to COVID. They're actually, Park City's last game from last year was against Wasatch. So they were actually kind of lucky to be able to face this Wasatch team from being able to face them last year. So being familiar with your rivalry, I think definitely helped actually both teams in this case. But, you know, for Park City, this just speaks, hey, you know, 5A, they're going to be able to compete. They're going to be able to claw because, as I said, Wasatch is 6-0. They're very dominant. They are a great team. They are probably going to be one of the top 3 teams in Region 8 and definitely one of the top teams in 5A. Wasatch is, I mean, for lack of a better word, I think they were just showing how physical they were. Their defense is very good. Their captain is actually on their defense. So to have your captain on your defense, as with Park City, their captain is their midfielder. It really shows you, you know, different styles of play, where Wasatch is very much that dominant defender team. Park City is maybe more on the offensive team, more stylistic, more finesse. So different styles for Park City and for Wasatch. Obviously, Wasatch came out with the victor with the score of 4-3. And we'll see where these two teams go in the future. And I believe both Park City and Wasatch have 2 good futures for soccer ahead of them. That's going to do it for this episode of The Scoreboard. I've been your host, Conrad Iacobellis. Everybody, make sure you check us out on Friday at 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. for a brand new episode of The Scoreboard. I'll see you guys on Friday.